So we're going to be covering something that's actually nothing like the abstract that's on the app. Sorry about that. We are actually going over accessibility for React Native. And that can be... There you go. So this is me. Aren't I lovely? So I am a lead engineer. I work for a company called Formidable. And if you notice at the very bottom of this, there is a link to these slides. So if you're having trouble seeing them or you want to reference them later, there they are. So have at thee. So I work for a company called Formidable, and we are a consulting and a contracting company that is based in Seattle and London. We have a couple of other offices. We work mostly with React, React Native, GraphQL, Node, and all of the surrounding technologies. So if you're looking to implement something correctly the first time, call us and we can help you. We can set it up and train you and make sure you don't spend 2 years fighting with it. We'll get you started right. So let's actually go back to accessibility. And I love this image because the people move. And I realize that we've had GIFs for a while, but it still makes me happy. So what is accessibility? People with disabilities can perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with websites and tools, and they can contribute equally without barriers. So that's straight off of the Web Accessibility Initiative website. So what does that really mean? It means that regardless of who you are, what your limitations are, you can contribute. You can be involved. You can buy rainbows if you want. It means that you can become a dev through research. It means that you can innovate and make something even better than React Native. It means that the limitation is not based on that technology. Which leads me to, what is disability? When a person is denied access due to a technology barrier, the impairment to their ability did not occur because of their body's limitation. Rather, the defect occurred in the technology. So that's a lot of words. What essentially says is this. Say you're in a wheelchair, and the place you need to get to is on the 3rd floor. When you wheel into a building and all you have is stairs, you are officially disabled. There is nothing you can do about it at that point. But if you wheel into that same building and it has an elevator that gets you to the 3rd floor, you're no longer disabled. The technology is there and available for you to use to be able to get you to the 3rd floor so you can continue on with whatever it is you need to be doing. What we're talking about is not wheelchairs, we're talking about the web. But the same concept still applies. If you are unable to use a website to learn, to buy something, to play, then you are officially disabled. But if the technology exists, and we know that it does, to allow us to interact with those things and to be part of them, just as if you were any normal person, you're not disabled. It is not you that's disabled, it's the technology. So there are different types of disabilities, and I know that most people focus heavily on the permanent disabilities. Things like being in a wheelchair, being permanently blind. But there are others, like temporary disabilities, like having a broken arm, having your eyes dilated, breaking your glasses, getting really mad and breaking your monitor. These things are something that you can heal from. They're something that will get better and will resolve themselves, and you'll go back to being what others consider a normal person. And then there's circumstantial disabilities, like being at a noisy conference room and trying to show someone a video. At that point, you're relying on technology such as subtitles to help you. Or your baby just fell asleep and it's in your mouse hand. There's not a flying chance you're going to move. At that point, you are circumstantially disabled. You can't use a mouse. You are limited to the keyboard. So when people are talking about accessibility features, they're not talking about other people. They're talking about people you know. They're talking about you. And by making these technologies available to everyone, including yourself, you're making them more accessible just in general. You're making sure that you're not the reason that other people are disabled. Why prioritize accessibility? I would say like 90% of your day is dictated by technology. And if you as a person are not included in that technology, what's the point if the app is fast? This was one of those moments in my life where I was sitting in a conference, and most of the time we're there to see our friends, maybe learn something new. But sitting at React Rally and watching Jennifer Van stand on that stage and say that was an absolute light bulb moment for me. What's the point if your app is fast, if you can't even use it? So why should business care? Like you and me, we're individuals. We can think for ourselves. We can develop that level of empathy. But a business is this entity. It's not human. It basically eats money and then spits out money and eats more money and spits out money. But it's not a human. Now, business is made by people, and we can develop those levels of empathy within people. But as a developer, you're interested in how to develop things correctly, how to make them better, how to make them faster. Managers, people that have to, report even higher than that, they have different priorities. And though they are concerned, they have a bottom line that they have to report about. So why should the business care? Now, according to the World Health Organization, about 15% of the world's population lives with some form of disability. The World Health Organization is always more conservative. And as someone said to me recently, my 98-year-old grandmother can barely walk. She's almost blind. She's almost deaf. And if you ask her if she's disabled, she will say no. This is a conservative number. According to the US Census in 2012, nearly 1 in 5 people have a disability in the US, and they quoted specifically a number of 19%. And again, 98-year-old grandmother is still going to say no. This is a conservative number. So even if we take the most conservative number, we're looking at something that's 15%. If your websites are accessible, you could get up to 15, 20% more engagement. If you're making money off of that website, that's 15 to 20% more money, just by including accessibility features. This is not adding a whole new feature set that a lot of people ask us to do, right? Like we have features we have to build. Why accessibility? Because with a little bit of accessibility knowledge, a little bit of testing, we can get 15 to 20% more back on our investment in time. That's huge. So when you need to go to the business and say, this is important and we need to do it, empathy is important, but so is money. So, there's more. The ramp outside of our local public library makes the building more easily accessible to those using wheelchairs, but also to the parents with the sleeping baby, the cyclist, or the delivery driver with a dolly full of packages. So what we're talking about there is that when you make something easier to read, easier to navigate, quicker to get to the final role, you're making it easier for every single person using your website, not just people using assistive technologies. By simplifying the process, by making it easier to navigate through, everyone benefits, including the bottom line. So not only are you saving and increasing the level of revenue by 15, 20%, it's actually more because everyone gets to use it more easily. And though that may not have been the original intention, it is the actuality. So what does this look like for React Native? Now, React Native has this lovely little niche where it's not quite web and it's not quite native. And there's lots of testing for web and there's lots of testing for native. But what does this mean for React Native? Well, let's start with the bare bones. And this is where we start getting a little bit more technical. You have to turn on your voiceover and your talkback. So sorry, peeps, but it's got to happen. All right, so how many of you have an iOS device? How many of you have an Android device? Okay, so I'm really sorry to all of you. iOS, you're doing pretty good. But let me explain why. These are the gestures for iOS. All right, you have double click, you have moving for scrolling, you can double finger slide, triple finger slide. They do a couple different things, right? So here it is for Android. In order to do things, you have to go down then right, or up then left, or up then right, and down and right, up and left, up and down, left and right and left, this crazy curly Q thing. Dead serious, and it means 3 different things. And then they have special things for how you search for a word or phrase. So I'm so sorry, Android people. However, as you may have noticed in this slide deck, here is a quick reference to all of these gestures for iOS. And here's a quick reference for all of these gestures in Android. And they are put out by DQ University. They are readily available for everyone to use. Again, you'll have the slide deck. You'll also be able to reference them here. So now that we know that we've got to turn them on, even though we really don't want to, and we have our cheat sheets to tell us how to navigate once they are turned on, what's next? What's next is talking about expected behavior. Innovation is great, but if it's at the expense of accessibility, being able to use your website, it's not worth it. I need to know that when I'm looking for a back button, I'm going to find it in the same spot on Android as I am on your app. I need to know that when I'm looking for my next button, that it's going to be in the same place that you'd expect it on the iOS app as I would your app. Making sure that you stick to some of those basic expected behaviors makes it much easier. Because someone may not have the screen reader turned on, they may just have some limited visibility issues, but they're looking for those same cues. So trying to stick to them a little bit is going to give you a lot of accessibility features right off the bat. People will already be able to understand how to navigate based on the fact that you followed those patterns. React Native has actually done a pretty good job of making sure that we have a lot of defaults that are already accessible. And allow font scaling is one of them. Essentially, it's already defaulted to true. Everyone can already scale. Please don't turn it off. Please. And there are other features that they've given us. It's been quite nice because if you look at this list, this is really all of the accessibility features you have available to you. It's not that many. Now you'll notice that some of them are iOS only, some of them are Android only, some of them share. And so, since I have time, I want to talk to you about what each of these really mean and when you should use them. So accessibility equals true is the very first one. You're going to put this on a view, and what that does is it allows the screen reader to read everything within that view, all at once. You could have 6 different text boxes, it'll just read them all the way through. All right? However, if you have a touchable element inside it, you will not be able to click it. So you need to make sure that you don't put a touchable element inside of a view that has accessibility equals true. And if you have accessibility equals true, you should really include the accessibility label that gives it a hint as to what it's supposed to be doing. We have accessibility traits. We have accessibility component type. One's for iOS and one's for Android. However, they mean something ever so slightly differently. Accessibility traits means type of element they have selected. There's 17 different options, from button to header. There's a lot. So you can be very descriptive with what you put here. There's even a none option. For accessibility component type, the type of element is what they've selected. So what we're talking about here is it a button? Is it a radio button and it's checked? Is it a radio button and it's unchecked? And none. That's all you have. So one is for identifying the element upon which you clicked, and the other one is for identifying the element where you made a selection. We do actually recommend that you put accessibility component type on every one that you put accessibility traits, even if the answer is none. Because at least you know it's not a button. You know it's not a radio button that's checked. You know it's not a radio button that's been unchecked. Accessibility view is modal, and accessibility elements hidden. Now with accessibility elements hidden, there is in fact an Android version. It's the important for accessibility. This one is no hide descendants. The other versions for that is auto, yes, and no. But when you're looking at these, they have 2 opposite effects. Accessibility view is modal, actually hides the sibling element from the screen readers, whereas accessibility element hidden hides that element from the screen readers when they're set to true. So though they may possibly be used for, one is on the modal, the other one is on the content, therefore you can trigger true and false on either side to make sure that the reader is associating correctly. The view modal, you're going to do true and false when it's opening and closing. The accessibility element hidden is going to be more like on a drop-down menu, or something that is activated when you open it and close it. On accessibility tap and on magic tap. So you know all of those gestures we talked about before, including the curly cues? Accessibility tap is when you double tap. A magic tap is when you double tap with 2 fingers. These just give you the option to have custom events when someone uses those gestures. You can have them do whatever you want, but this allows you access into that element. It's like assigning what we right-clicked on as opposed to left-clicking on. How many have heard of Accessibility Live Region? Fewer than I thought. So this is the one that I've actually seen a lot. This would be something like when you get a notification, it immediately disregards whatever you're doing and yells at you and says, by the way, this is updated. It's really great for that, but you have to keep in mind that there's 3 options. There's none, there's polite, and there's assertive. All right, so this is great for a dynamically updating section that you need the user to know about, or a dynamically updating section that you need to make sure the user doesn't know about. None, make sure the user doesn't know about it. Polite just tells them, and tells them what it is that's updated. And assertive stops everything and tells them what it is that updated. So there's a little bit of an interesting issue with polite. If you've put this in too many places, it's going to start talking when this one updates, and then start talking when this one updates, and continue talking as this one updates, and continue talking as this one updates. And before you know it, you've got 6 voices that are all talking over each other, and not a single one of them can be heard. And there's also the other concern, if you're using assertive, that it's talking while you've interrupted it to tell it something else. Which one was more important? Who knows? Because assertive interrupts. So be careful where you use this. It is a very powerful tool, but be careful where you use it. And look for those use cases where they're going to start overlapping or interrupting each other to make sure that when you are interrupting, you're interrupting for a good reason. So let's go over some automated testing. The web has Axe core. What does React Native have? Exactly. What you can do is use something that's slightly less automated but still somewhat manual. So iOS has the accessibility inspector, and this will tell you pretty much how to turn it on. But it goes through and it gives you recommendations based on your app on some of the accessibility features that you want to implement. It will also go through and use a Braille reader to be able to identify some of those limitations that you've included. So this is wonderful for making sure that after your app is compiled, that it's actually accessible. This may not be as automated as you'd like, but we're getting closer. Android has an accessibility scanner app that will do pretty much the same thing. So for all of you with Android, I kind of think you got the good bag on this one. You just download the app, you open up your app, and you have it run an audit. And then it comes back and reports on things that it found that you have problems with. So we have Eslamp JSX, Eslamp plugin JSX A11y for the web. But we don't really have anything for React Native. Sorry. Maybe we do. So React Native is something that, again, Formidable uses quite a lot. And therefore, we've decided that it is in our best interest and in everyone's best interest to develop a tool that should have existed years ago. So we've created Eslamp plugin React Native A11y, which means you can now lint some of your tools as you're coding and not just waiting until you're done and building and processing. So if any of you want to thank someone for that, I would totally go to Twitter and thank Alex Saunders. He put a lot of work into this. So these are some of the tools that it covers. And I know that's really small, and I don't actually intend for you to read it. But what it does, in fact, cover is some of the really common mistakes, like not making sure that when you have accessibility equals true, that you also have a label, or making sure that you don't have any touchable elements within an accessibility equals true. It checks the props and makes sure that you have the right parameters for the right accessibility traits, or that you also have accessibility component type selected for you. So a lot of those things that I just told you, you now have a linter that will also tell you. Thank you. So we're constantly fighting with JavaScript. We've got JavaScript, we have React, we have React Native, we have native, and the thing that I want you to keep in mind, when you're talking about tools and you're talking about the challenges and you're talking about people with disabilities and people that don't but do right now, just always remember to be kind, because everyone you meet is fighting with JavaScript. thank you for coming. And here's plenty of resources for more information.